Hello.
Hello, hello.
It's just abrupt.
It's like there and then it's not there.
Yes. All right.
So,
It's July's Kimberbell
digital
dealer Wallflower Mystery Quilt. These are the little borders
The border pieces
underneath
in
the
between the rows.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's really high.
Okay. So yeah, that's what we're going to be doing today. And if you're maybe if you're a sewer, you might think that there's some unnecessary steps here, and if you don't
We've been
sew,
thinking that.
you're going to be like, okay, great, and then you might be upset that you do have to do a little bit of sewing. But essentially, you have a bunch of these little rectangles in 2 different colors, and we have, if you're going to follow the Kimberbell instructions, you're going to basically do what we're doing 6 times.
Yep.
We're going to do 1 block A, and we're going to do 1 block B, and then we're going to cut it apart and show you how to piece those pieces together, and then we're going to quilt a section, and then you're going to basically just duplicate this
out
2 more times. Yes.
So our brains are going, why wouldn't I just sew the strip and then quilt the strip like we would a regular border or something like that?
Right.
So yes, this will give us exact piecing. So if your piecing skills are maybe not very good, then this would definitely be good things to do in the hoop.
Right.
Otherwise, you could trim the squares to be and sew them together and then just piece each strip.
Yes.
And then quilt the final piece.
Yeah, which would be probably quicker. And I think really you're going to use a lot more stabilizer this way, and then you're going to end up with 2 layers of stabilizer in your
project.
In your little border strip pieces. So, I mean, it's no show match, so it's not going to take up a ton of extra space, but it is going to be one more thing in that general area. So we'll let you decide how you want to
go that route. We'll show you what we're going to do based on the instructions, and you can then make your decision from there. They've really attempted to take as much sewing out of their projects as they possibly can. So I think that's where this is coming from, is doing what you can in the hoop.
Yep.
If they didn't do it in the hoop, there would be somebody out there that says, well, why didn't you make this available to do in the hoop? So,
right.
I mean, there's probably no easy way to approach this, but you can certainly make your own choice.
Yeah, and after we do one section, we'll be able to verify the sizes. I think I'm assuming they're going to be right, and then and then basically what I would do is I would just take whatever size these actually need to be width-wise this way. I would just sew the strips alternating like this, and then press all of your seams, and then split the whole thing in half. Right, and
because you're sewing half the seams that way.
Exactly. That would be just so much easier to do. Yep. We just need to verify
what the end result
measurement
is, so that we can make sure we're giving you the right numbers.
Exactly, which would be just a little bit quicker to do, and you'd use a little bit less stabilizer. So.
Yep. I mean, thread-wise, it's not going to be much different. So that's not going to be a big savings or anything from that. But the stabilizer in the border piece versus not.
Yeah.
Because of course we're going to have it from the piecing and from the quilting.
Yes.
That's what she meant by the 2.
Yes.
And then if you quilt it,
right,
you'll have to have at least 1 in there.
Yeah. And if this was one of those instances where you pieced maybe your 3 pieces and then it was going to go ahead and quilt over top of it, we would be like, okay, yeah, go ahead and do that.
Right.
But this wasn't set up.
2 separate steps.
Yeah. So it wants you to get all of your strips pieced first, and then go back and do like your border type quilting part.
That was what I was like, well, we're going to quilt after. And she's like, no. I was like, oh,
no, we're not.
Oh, okay. Let's get going, because there's a few steps this way.
That's right. So we have the 5x7 hoop loaded.
We do, and the design is up. It just looks like a couple little ladders on there. It's the same one for A or B. It's just a matter of what order you're putting the fabrics in.
Yep.
So we're going to get going.
We just have that no-show mesh in. We just picked a green color so that it would be easier to see when we're trying to put the fabrics down. We were going to do white, but then we were like, well, it's just harder to see.
It's harder for us to see. It'll be even harder for you guys to see. So you can see down here now against the white a little bit anyways.
Yep.
That's a lot of thread for that.
I know.
Jeez. You think it was construction or something?
Oh,
that was a lot.
Seems so odd.
It's not just me, right? That seems like a lot of thread to tell me where to put my fabric.
It definitely seems weird.
Okay.
It definitely seems like a unique way of doing this.
You know, when it went this way, I'm like, okay, well, it's just going to go back up around. But then it went back over it all again. And I was like,
okay,
that's. Maybe they forgot to move their starts and stops.
Maybe.
Benefit of the doubt.
Benefit of the doubt.
All right, so an A block is going to go with the darker fabric first. So the there's 3 blocks, 1, 2, 3. We need to cover that first block. This is going to be like a folded fabric technique. So first one goes pretty side up, completely covering your space that you're using. These look like they finish about 2 by 2. More than enough fabric to.
Yeah.
So I suppose I probably should trim that.
Yeah. Are those not the good ones?
They're okay.
Okay.
There's a straight pair somewhere floating around here.
Oh yeah, they're sitting over here.
And I knew they were over there somewhere. I just was making sure that this wasn't them because those don't cut well at all.
Yeah.
All right, so using a folded fabric technique, we have our both cut line and our placement line is what was just stitched. So now I cut everything from below that line and I take the edge of my next color, which is the lighter green, and I put that pretty side down, and my edge of my fabric goes on that line, not over it, but that is going to allow for a seam allowance. So it's built into the pattern. So it's now going to stitch approximately 1/4 inch up from that edge. This is absolutely riveting.
That is not a scant 1/4 inch, if you were wondering.
Nope, it's not. It's a big old fat one.
We have our little water pen there that'll just help us fold that down so we get a nice crisp edge. Because we don't want it to be sloppy.
Roll if you would like. So we've got our seam roller here as well. This would be in place of pressing that. And then we're going to repeat that whole thing, but with the next color fabric.
This will be our cut line. And then it will also be our placement line.
I guess I could put my fabric in before I do that. So cut and then take our darker piece, again, pretty side down. Once you have your first one, they're all down. First one pretty side up. Every following piece is pretty side down. And we're going to fold that down. This step is not mandatory, but it does give you a much flatter, prettier seam. You could also press that over with an iron if you had a little in the hoop iron.
And then this is going to be like your cutting line to split the two pieces together. Split them apart, not split them together.
I like split them together. That works. I'd like to try that. Fabric frays coming through there.
Okay, so if you are going to do this way, you would need 3 of these total. So you would need to do this colorway 2 more times. This is block A.
All right. And that's it.
That's it.
So you're going to cut here to separate those 2 out. And then on the back, you can still see.
Yeah, you'll use the bottom and top line as
the edges there to know for your seam allowance.
Yeah, yeah.
We're going to pop that out. We're going to hoop a fresh piece of no-show mesh. And you guys would need to make 2 more of what you just did. We're going to switch to B just so that you can see and don't have to watch this riveting video for that long.
Right. And so this is going to be exactly the same. The difference is that we're going to start with the different fabric piece. We'll do this really fun outline stitch again, and then we'll start with our lights.
Yes,
light,
we will.
Dark, light.
Light, dark, light instead of the other. Yeah. It's just 2 inches.
Yeah, so we can just cut them into 2.5-inch strips. Sew those together.
And then cut 2.5, 2.5.
And then cut them in half once we have them all sewn together. And then we'll have our 3-inch wide strips to be able to quilt. That would be so much easier. Yeah.
So we need
those. One of those. Maybe I can get Carolyn working on this part.
Yeah. Don't confuse her. Just one thing.
Yeah.
Okay.
You doing something else? No, okay.
Just don't be like, do this and then
this. Yeah.
All right, so there's that base piece there. So our first one was an A block, and the A block had the dark fabric first with the light in the center. So we see dark, light, dark. The B blocks are going to be just the reverse of that. So I'm going to start with my light fabric. And again, I'm going to completely cover those blocks and stitch this line, and it's going to give me my cut and placement line. So this is the excess fabric I don't need. So whenever we do this in a class, a lot of times I get asked, well, what happens if I don't cut that out? You will have a very bulky seam, and you would be able to see that fabric underneath this one as it turns over. So this piece is darker than the first, but on that previous one, this one was the light. So if I didn't remove that darker fabric, you'd actually have a shadow showing through. So I don't recommend not trimming. All right, so I've just lined my edges up after trimming, and now we're going to get that roughly 1/4 inch seam allowance. So if your folded fabric is being like in the front of a bag or something like that, and then it's and the fabrics won't show through, it's not as big of a deal to cut and remove all of the excess.
Yeah.
But when you're doing quilting, your seams are going to be very bulky, and you definitely don't want any show through. So for this type, I would absolutely recommend trimming that out.
Yeah. Also, if your pieces are really small, these are pretty generous, so it's okay. You're going to cut them to 2.5. Yes, you are. There's a lot of waste.
All right. We're now going to get the trim and placement line for the last piece. Yay. So again, this is exactly like we just did for version A. We're just reversing our fabrics. Otherwise, we're not doing anything different. And to complete this project using this technique, you're going to do 3 version A's and 3 version B's.
Yep, and we'll show you how to trim them down. And in this version, they have you trimming them down and then using a 1/2 inch seam allowance to sew your A's and B's together.
Under the foot. That's always a good way to go. Under the foot.
Under the foot, yeah.
That definitely helps to stitch.
Or through. I know.
I have no idea if that is starch or if that's just water in there, but
either way it works out.
Yep. And then a final stitch straight up the middle.
Then we trim a 1/2 inch away from that line and this line.
Just
and then on that line.
Yep. You need to do the sides too, or don't worry about the sides.
Yes, trim on the sides.
Okay. So trying to make sure that fabric doesn't move on me, because it's of course not really tacked down. I'm going to get about a 1/2 inch away down here. I don't have a rotary cutter over here, or I would use that, but we're going to just do this. If I had a rotary, I would just throw my ruler out a 1/2 inch from those lines and make that happen. But this will be close enough.
Yeah, so essentially what it says here is to trim with your rotary cutter like 3 inches away from that center line. But we all know that it's nice if that's a little bit bigger, it's not gonna hurt you while you're sewing your border strips. Sometimes it's nice to have a little extra wiggle.
Because sometimes it draws it in.
Right. And then a 1/2 inch from the top and the bottom were the short ends. And they've got you like marking it with a pen first and then cutting it just in case you want to double check.
All right, so I have done approximately 1/2 inch all the way around, and then we have the stitched line that's right down the center that we're going to cut right on that one.
Yep.
And again, I would do this with my rotary, but my fancy dancy scissors are going to work just fine for our purpose. All right, so now we have 2 strips. And then this is the stabilizer to do all of the other things. We're going to repeat that with our B strip.
Yep. And then we're going to sew those strips together. And, oh, that makes sense. That'll get us 1 row.
One of the pieces.
Yeah, like one
whole piece.
one whole row of a strip when you put all of those 4 pieces together.
To go across.
To go across, yep. And then we asked Carolyn to sew some of the other strips together for us. So we'll probably have those pieces sewn together before we're finished with like quilting one of these. And then you can see what it looks like when it's pieced. So let's find a regular presser foot. And I will change that so that we can sew those pieces together.
In case anybody's wondering, the rotary would also be faster than what I'm doing. But you use what you have.
Okay, I'm going to put this in sewing mode, so watch your arm as I do that. I don't want it to ram into you.
All right, so we have that fabric like to shift underneath that stabilizer. We have B's and we have A's, and I'm sure it will shock everybody that we're going to alternate those to make that strip.
Yep, you're going to start with a dark strip at the top. Yep, so AB, AB. And then they want you to sew this with a 1/2 inch seam allowance, which is probably going to be right on that line.
So the question is, how close did I cut?
You want me to go check it with the rotary cutter and the ruler?
Nah, it'll be fine.
Okay.
Just
you could probably, or you could, I was going to say you could take the stabilizer out if that would be easier, and then just use the...
I'm using the stabilizer as
your guide. Okay.
Okay.
I even got you a foot controller.
Whoa, so fancy. All right. Okay, so I'm just stitching on this line. You can use a 1/2 inch. Oh, wow. I don't even sew that slow. You can use a 1/2 inch guide if you've truly cut that 1/2 inch.
Right.
You can go that route. So we're just basically going to make a whole strip.
Yep.
That's literally all he's doing here. I just have to check my seam since I didn't use a rotary. enough for who it's for. Which is just me. All right. One more. Getting there.
Mm-hmm.
Sam called last night. They're seeing animals everywhere. They've seen a bull moose, other mooses, moose babies, bear babies. They're having a good old time.
Kinds of fun stuff.
I was like, this is really cool. Send me pictures. You know, you don't have to call me at your honeymoon. She's like, I wanted to share. I'm like, okay. I mean, you can call.
Right.
But I'm not sitting here thinking, why hasn't she called and told me what they did today?
Right.
She just left. And I moved it. Oh, well. Again, good enough for who it's for. We don't have the... Like, why isn't the foot going up?
Yeah.
I'm struggling over here. Okay, so we have our strip. You are going to get basically one strip from each AB stitch out.
Yep.
Which will give you 3 strips, which will be what you need for the quilt.
Exactly.
We're doing one of these the way that the instructions say.
Yes.
And then we're going to play with the others and let you know how that goes too.
Yep. And I would probably, I probably would maybe trim out that excess stabilizer in there.
Yeah, there's no reason for it to stay there.
Or at least cut in between, because sometimes you'll get like a little bit of, yeah, you can't see that. Come on, where's the mouse? Sometimes you'll get like a little bit of like tunneling here from that, and so if you have that issue,
then it doesn't lay flat.
It doesn't want to lay flat, then definitely that's a good time to do that. So yep. And your quilting file, you'll have a 3x10 or a 3x12 option.
Okay.
To do the quilting. So we'll be back in just a second. We'll have our hoop all set up and we'll do some quilting. All right, we're back. It was just a split second for you.
That's all it was here too.
And we have the rest of our border pieces sewn. So why don't you put that over on the camera, and I will flip that over there. And if you want to piece yours, do you have all 3?
I have 2.
Oh, wait, it fell underneath your chair.
I'm like, how did I lose one already?
If you want to piece yours instead of doing it in the hoop, what you're going to do is you're going to, yep.
Not hoop.
Yes, hooped and not hoop. So what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to trim down the pieces that you have in your quilt kit. You'll select 4 of them, 2 of each color, and you're going to trim those to 3 inches by 7 inches, because those end up needing to be the top and the bottom of the 3 the 3 rows, and then the rest of the pieces you're going to cut down to 2.5 inches by 7 inches, and you'll be able to do 1 whole row, and then you'll be able to split that in half, and then basically like we did in our hoop, we're going to have one section where you're going to have to like piece half of it, cut it in half, and then piece the other half, which is exactly what we did in the hoop. So you're going to essentially do exactly the same thing. And the reason that
these are 12 pieces long.
Yes.
This would be 6 pieces long, cut in half and sewn back together to make 12.
Yes, exactly. And the reason that we want the top and the bottom pieces to be just a smidge bigger is because we've got seam allowance on the outside.
Yep.
And you want to, sometimes these shrink up a little bit, so we want to have just a little bit extra on the outside that we could trim down if we need to.
Right. When you quilt in the hoop, you always want to have a little more than what you're going to end up needing.
Yes.
Just to make sure everything is going to fit where it needs to fit.
Exactly. So that's what we did. And then
it's a lot easier to trim it off than to add it afterwards.
It is. It is absolutely easier to trim off rather than add later. Which if you look real closely at ours, you'll see that we added later. Because I was like, oh, we're going to need just a little bit more at the top. So I went ahead and just pieced back essentially the piece that I trimmed off.
Yep.
And then we went ahead and we selected the 3-inch by 12-inch design.
We did.
And we put it into the machine, and then we used our 9 square button to duplicate it. So we're going to trim, we're going to quilt all 3 of our strips at the same time. But we are still going to need 2 hoopings.
I'm just looking. I was like 3 inches with seam allowance.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is, that's what we're going to do, right? Does that sound good?
It does sound good.
Did I miss anything?
No.
Do we have some batting over here?
Somewhere down here.
Got a chunk? Yep. Oh, good. Perfect. That should work.
Yeah, maybe.
Oh, there's squares.
Where's the stuff that I did yesterday? Oh, I think it's in that basket.
In the basket? Okay.
Yep.
All right. So you'll need your batting and your trimming scissors.
I think that's the approximate color that they used.
Okay.
Do you like that? That might be a little too lime for that
Yeah,
one.
I actually think I like that one. So
This one?
Yeah, what color is that?
That is ES950 that we are going to do our quilting with.
All right, so we're going to quilt with this little avocado color, ES950. That is what we are going to do. Can't get it.
It's back there.
I got the wrong angle. Okay, so let's get to the sewing part. All right, we've done border pieces a bunch of times, but we're basically going to start with our placement pieces.
This will be perfect.
Yeah.
It'll be okay.
For this, it will.
Your stabilizer is about 1 inch too short to be able to run it.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to turn it.
You gotta turn it
so much.
Yeah.
But that's okay.
Yep.
All worth it. I did move them down so we're not reaching as far.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, that does make a difference. It's not a great visual on the batting or on the placement lines here. Sorry, guys.
It's actually darker than the last color.
Yeah.
So I just have a strip of batting. So as soon as that's done, we're just going to lay the batting right over top. Your brain is going to say squish these really tight so I don't waste that little inch in between. But it is much easier to use these border pieces if you have a little space in between them. If they're too tight, the fabric wants to overlap, and then you are fussing with things while it's stitching. So do make sure you leave a little bit of space between them.
Yeah, and one of the reasons why we like that 9 square button so much is because it automatically groups the sections, and sometimes when you color sort, when you
get
have
weird stuff if you color sort.
Depending on what colors they make their different pieces and parts. But this one, it doesn't really color sort. It basically number stops. It groups them by
all of 1,
all of 2, all of 3. Yep.
So we can do all 3 things at the same time. A lot of times when Kimberbell is programming, they have every other color orange, teal, orange, teal. So when you hit color sort, sometimes the oranges will group together. So it changes the order that things are stitched in. So it does depend on the programming, but it's definitely something to look for. So color sorting is a wonderful thing when it does what it's supposed to.
Yep, and we just have a large chunk of batting that we're going to put in here instead of 3 individual strips.
Which you could do strips and just lay that out there. Because we're basically doing one big square, this is easier than doing strips.
Exactly.
Because then I'd have to cut my strips.
Yeah.
And I don't particularly get my little bubbles out of there. I don't like bubbles.
No, nobody likes bubbles in their batting.
No bubbles in the batting. Better. And of course, it's a construction stitch, so it's going to go twice. Which it's supposed to do. It just makes it take longer.
Yes. We are almost done with our 3 little strips, and then Lisa's going to do all the hard work, and she's going to trim the batting away. Okay.
So again, we just had one large piece. We can use the rest of that to do the next hooping. So for this type of, doing these borders, and this is actually easier than a strip, but whatever you have. I don't recommend piecing, like putting 2 small pieces together.
Yeah.
But other than that, whatever you have, make work.
You throwing things?
I am totally throwing things around. That was our bobbin tube that has 1 bobbin left at the bottom. So it was very light. It didn't take much to knock it over. You can probably tell I did slide this design set down at to the bottom of the hoop. Mostly so that I'm not reaching as far back here. So you can see there's only a small space here. There's a larger space back here. That is because I slid it down just to make working the hoop a little bit easier when it's on the machine. Last little bit right here. All right, so we've got our 3 strips. The next thing it's going to do is show us where we need to make sure our fabric is being covered by. Where on like a regular square, I often skip this step. I do not skip this step here.
No, it's definitely harder.
You definitely want to be able to see and make sure that you're not missing any space, because it's a real bummer when you do all this work and then it doesn't,
the border doesn't
work out.
Or, yeah, you're crooked or.
Yep. So you will notice there is no seam allowance on the ends, either top or bottom, and that is because this is a border stitch.
Yep.
So that is designed to be able to connect to another stitch out. So when we start placing, the first time you need to add your fabric at the top. Don't place it right at the batting edge. Add your seam allowance, which is why we made the edges 3 inches instead of 2.5, so that we have that excess fabric there to work with.
Right. You probably really only needed 2 3/4, but
3 was easy.
It was easier, and then you have just a little bit extra wiggle room.
Yeah. So our fabrics ended up at like 24.5, which gives us that excess for the top and the bobbin, which will not be stitched.
Bottom.
Which is
bobbin. You said bobbin.
Did I say bobbin?
Yeah. Bottom. Yep.
Yeah, that one.
It's so easy, right?
I use them interchangeably.
Right.
I mean,
we were just talking about bobbins.
Sorry. But yeah, so that's you'll have excess at each end. How about that?
Yes.
I won't use either word. All right, so at this point, I need to place my fabric. If I am connecting, I'm going to do that a little differently than the first piece. So the first piece is obviously the easiest, because I'm just going to grab and place. So this one happens to be the one we did in the hoop. It doesn't matter. We're going to use them the same way. So you can see the edge of my batting, and I need to have, I'm going to kind of try to aim for that stitch line that I have on there. So if you did that, that's kind of a good gauge to make sure. And you want to make sure that each side of the strip is covering that exterior stitch, which is why it's important to do that, to make sure that you know you're going to cover. The idea is not to have a piece that fits exactly in that size. We tried that originally. It doesn't work because it shrinks in. You want it to overlap and then trim them down afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you're attempting to get your fabric to fit in there, don't. You're going to be very unhappy in the long run. So I'm going to overlap, like I said, at the top, and I'm going to tape that piece down. And then I am going to smooth out my piece, make sure my seam allowances are, we've pressed ours open. So I'm just making sure that everything is covered there. And then I'm going to tape, I'm just going to go this way here to keep it in place. And then I'm going to move to the next one. And this one, we've got a lot more seams because this is one we sewed. So I'm going to aim for that same amount across the top. I'm going to tape that down. And then make sure that I am all the way across. Now, if you remember, I also was just using scissors with no measurement over here. So if you're noticing that they're not the same width, that's why, is because I didn't actually measure when I was trimming, because I was using scissors instead of a rotary. So if you actually used a rotary, yours would be the same size. All right. So again, I'm just going to try to get that roughly the same excess at the top. It's not going to matter if you're a little off. Don't stress over that. And then again, double check that everything is laying down flat and you are evenly spaced around those edges. And then we're going to tape down here. So you guys know I don't normally tape. Borders are an exception to that rule. Tape, tape, and lots of tape. You don't want things moving. It's super annoying when you thought you had everything there and then it moves. So you do want it to stay where you put it. And this is simply going to straight lines down each side to hold the fabric in place.
Yep.
That's all this guy's going to do. It's not a square, it's not a rectangle, it's 2 straight lines down each side. Now I so did not cut straight. It looked really good. The stabilizer was much straighter than the fabrics because the fabrics weren't attached.
Right.
And so it you know how fabric pushes? Yeah, that was happening pretty badly.
Yeah, there's plenty of fabric. So
there's absolutely plenty of fabric because you're going to actually cut just outside that. So there's more than enough fabric, even if you screwed that up somewhere. So don't stress about that one. Did you hear Tucker went to the nail place and Warren?
No, I knew she was considering it.
Found my color.
Oh, did she?
Yes.
Was it inexpensive?
Less than $10.
Oh, yeah. That's nice.
Less than $8.
Yeah.
So when we started creating these, we try to remember anyways, it's much easier if they all go this way, because the fabric can push a little bit. But we have to remember to do that because it doesn't naturally go that way.
No, especially when you copy and paste.
The closest.
Yeah, it just goes right to the other thing. I mean, that's, I got one line, so I just duplicate it.
Yep.
But you got to duplicate it and mirror it.
Yeah.
Yep. So Kimberbell, if you're listening, flip those.
You should flip that. Because I have gotten, which the first one doesn't matter, but when it's connected up here, I have actually gotten a little bubble.
Yeah.
Because it pushes the fabric just enough that I've gotten a little bubble where it connects to the previous stitch out.
Exactly.
All right, so this is going to be just a couple minutes. This is the quilting.
Yep.
So we're going to quilt all 3 pieces, and then we'll be back.
Yes. We can appropriate
it completely.
Okay.
All right, so all 3 are quilted. We are now going to pop these out of the hoop. We'll get another piece in the hoop. We can get the placement lines and things started and the batting going while I'm trimming.
Yep. I can do that.
But big old hoop that doesn't fit on my table.
No, I can take it.
I think I'll be all
right.
right. Yeah. Try and put my bracelet in the hoop. Thought I could do it. I'm hoop challenged today. There we go. All right, 9.5 by 14. I'm going to put that over here. We'll get that going again. You can save your tape. You will need to tape again. Sometimes you get a lot of, because it's the edges, you get a lot of fabric pieces in there. So if it's not good tape, don't try to reuse it. So what we want to do is to trim from the back here. And at this point, I do not use rotary. We're not trying to get it right on the line. We're trying to get rid of the excess stabilizer. So I generally fold the stabilizer back from the stitch line, and that's where I cut. You're going to, since we have everything in the exact same distance, we technically could leave everything in between. Sometimes I have good luck with that. Sometimes I'm like, oh, why did I do that? But what do you think? Should we try it?
Yeah.
Gonna get rid of this stuff here. All right, so back over here, we are ready for some more stabilizer. That's not stabilizer.
Batting.
That's the stuff. At least I knew I said the wrong thing this time. All right. So if we're going to leave that, then we'll see.
And if it doesn't work, we'll split them in half.
We can split them when we are moving them around. Oh, this is going to take just a second here. It's got to do this 3 times.
Yeah, 3 times.
Total 6 because it's going to go around each twice. So.
Yep.
Oh my goodness.
Now we got to trim around the batting again.
All right. Because you're going to be,
Start that again.
So when you are cutting at the top for this, when you're doing a border or a sashing, don't leave excess. Make sure that you have a nice clean line here because you're going to be butting the other piece up. So if you have excess stuff in here, you won't get a nice smooth seam.
Yes.
So that all trimmed.
Now we're going to do that placement line so we know where to put all of our strips of fabric. Riveting, isn't it?
So much so. But at least this is just a once around.
Yep. One more. A moment of truth, right?
Yeah. All right. So the goal at this point is to take the previously stitched and line them up with these guys here. So I have all 3 here. I'm folding back the unstitched part on top. And this is fun because there's little seam allowances all over here. So there's a little bit of extra fabric in there, which is fine. But what you want to do is line up these pieces with the previously stitched parts. So I'm going to get that batting and I'm going to push it right up into, and of course my tape twisted because that's the way we roll. See why I don't like tape? All right. Nice and tight there. All right, once you have those positioned, we are going to pull those down. If you can see the bottom here. How's that?
Good.
All right, so we want to, again, make sure that we are evenly balanced. And then don't stretch, but make sure it's nice and tight. And tape that edge down. All right, and you're going to do that with all 3 pieces.
Make sure that you're right scooched up at the top, batting to batting. And then you can kind of walk these down. Again, make sure your seams are flat so you don't get a big bump. And then tape at the bottom. Evidently, I cannot put a piece of tape on straight today. I've got an angle thing going on. All right. And again, your pieces should be approximately the same length. If they're not exact, it's okay. They're not going to be right next to each other in the quilt. So if one piece has got a stitch a little over one line or something, like it doesn't make any difference. All right, do make sure that that top piece is staying in place. And then we're going to go back to the machine. At this point, you do want to double check that your previously stitched pieces are not tucking up underneath.
That would not be great.
That doesn't, it's not fun.
No.
These are not very long, so they don't tend to curl under quite as badly. But once, if you're doing multiple like border pieces for larger, that is something to definitely look out for. This one is going to just do the straight lines and attach those into place. And you should have a 1/2 inch-ish at the end that's not being stitched on. Yep. That is normal based on the size of the fabric that we started with.
Yeah. If you were doing this in a 10-inch hoop, you might end up stitching through your 1/2 inch at the bottom piece.
Yep. So if you only have a 10-inch hoop and you have to hoop 3 times to get this, and you have an edge here, tape the entire edge so that your foot does not get caught. Because again, having it, once you got this far, having something mess up is no fun at all.
No, it's really frustrating.
So if you are unable to do an entire piece like we are here, make sure that you have tape covering that entire edge. Put it right over the batting. It'll come off. You're not going to end up using that batting, so it doesn't matter.
Right.
Put it right over that batting piece and make sure that it stays nice and smooth so that your foot does not get caught on that little bit. So, and this is where I was talking about, sometimes you get a little bubble. You can usually kind of wiggle that out, but it's still annoying. So I do like it starting at the top and working its way down better.
Ooh. Don't sew through your finger.
No, my nail's just long enough it hit the needle bar, the screw. Trying to keep any bubbles from happening. I don't like those. All right, so at this point, we are simply going to do the quilting again, which is about 4 minutes per section. So we'll be back.
Yeah.
Did we wait too long?
There we go.
We're back. And look at these, all pretty. So we have 3 that are now all quilted. And if you were to measure this before and after, it definitely would be smaller now, which is why we wanted just that little bit of extra on the end. So at this point, we're going to remove all of the stabilizers, and then we'll trim on the outside line here. So that is your 1/4 inch.
Yep, I was trying to figure out, it's supposed to be, so we were at 3 by 25. I'm trying to find the last page. I think there's only 3 pages. It doesn't say assembly instructions. It does not tell me how big it's supposed to be when it's quilted.
So the piece that we did in the hoop, I measured before we started, and it was just over 24 and a half.
Yep.
So even that,
yeah, I'm sure it's probably going to be like 24 or 24 and a half when all of the pieces.
Yep.
We don't have the finishing instructions yet, so.
Yeah, we don't. Unfortunately, it's not the end of the year yet, so we don't have those. Do not trim anything off the ends until you get the whole quilt put together and you see what you actually need. So
exactly.
Don't think, oh, well, I'm going to make that whatever.
Yeah, just leave that until you have the instructions later.
You can remove all of this, but make sure all of your ends are still there so that you can trim down to the appropriate size once we finish.
Mm-hmm.
So that is literally it. You're going to remove your excess stabilizer from the sides and the ends, and then set them aside with all of your other blocks because we're not there yet.
Yes.
To put anything together.
And that's all you're going to do for that.
So
sorry.
Oh, that's okay. I was just going to show that line a little closer. So
there
this is the line in the center.
Yeah.
That is on the front. The white here. We want to cut out here. So you want a 1/4 inch out from basically your batting line.
Mm-hmm.
Don't cut on the front lines.
Right.
Because you will not have a large enough piece. So do not use the line up here to trim. You want it to trim from the back so that you can see that, and you're going to be a 1/4 inch out, which should be this line out here. Just make note of that.
Yep.
Little things.
Little tiny things.
Sometimes we see those lines on the front, and like our squaring stitch for the squares, the line on the front is the cut line, but it is not on this. So I just wanted to say that out loud.
A little bit away from that. So don't cut that.
Don't do that.
No, that really becomes kind of like your seam line as opposed to that. So, all right. Well, this was super cute and super fun, and we will see you in August.
We will do that.
All right. Bye. I got to find the right button.